One result of the October War was that Henry Kissinger negotiated an Israeli withdrawal from a small portion of Sinai. A year after the war, we went to Sinai with Sadat. Mr. President, quite frankly, a great many people in the West look at the Sinai and they say, this is nothing but sand. Mm-hmm. Is there, in fact, no way in which a compromise can be achieved by which somewhere here in the Sinai, Israel can have the security it requires and you can have the honor you demand?
This is very important. This is not the correct logic, you see. If this is sand, well, the motherland, if it is sand, mud, or marshes, or whatever it is the motherland. I don't know if the ordinary American citizen can agree to the fact that anyone comes to some of the western desert, some of your deserts there, and grab by force a piece of this desert and then starts to impose his conditions. This is the situation here.
How can you convince the Israelis who are 17 kilometers from you, granted sitting on your territory, that once you get Sinai back, you won't attack them?
How can you convince me on the other side that I shall not be attacked by them? This is the same thing.
During the 5 weeks we spent with Sadat, the issue of war and peace confronted him constantly, pursuing him even to his village. A representative of the Pope came to call. They discussed religious tolerance. A settlement in Jerusalem is important to other Arabs. Sadat would like the Pope to pressure the Israelis. Part of our stay was during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. Like all good Muslims, Sadat fasted from sunup to sundown and often didn't begin work until late at night. Sometimes he works at the Abdeen Palace, built in splendor by King Farouk. He has few aides and rarely gives the impression of working hard. Critics believe the Egyptian bureaucracy rumbles on without a firm hand at the top. On another night, the American ambassador, Herman Isles, called on Sadat at home. The president often works here. He has the reputation of being a good listener and a persuasive talker. On any given night, the meetings reflected the effort for peace and the contingency for war. This night, first a group of businessmen who want to encourage tourists. Sadat gave the go-ahead for tourist centers. He hopes this will mean money in Egyptian pockets. Second meeting, preparation for fighting. The British Under-Secretary of Defense discussed an aircraft sale. It was not accidental that the third important man here was the personal representative of King Faisal. Saudi Arabia pays many of Egypt's bills. By the end of the evening, Sadat had purchased British helicopters. No matter how late his visitors ever left, he ended his evenings by sitting and watching a movie. Much of Sadat's time is devoted to ceremony. On this night, the swearing in of a new cabinet. There were no changes which marked a shift in policy. The business of fealty over, Sadat chaired a cabinet meeting. Sadat does not like detail and confines himself to broad directives. The issue here was galloping inflation and the need to reconstruct a staggering economy. Nowhere is reconstruction needed more than in the Suez Canal area. During our stay, we accompanied the president on what he called a reconstruction visit to the canal. Sadat does not travel to learn the hard facts. Those he can gather at home. The trip was intended to raise morale. It did. There was adulation everywhere, but nowhere more fervent than during a cruise in the harbor which finally led up the canal itself. The more effort Egypt puts into building here, the more encouraged are the Israelis.
if he reconstructs the canal area and opens the canal and puts hundreds of thousands of people back there, that indicates that he's not going to be very anxious to get them bombed out again. That's therefore a great index of whether he sees the peaceful option is available. And in the measure that he is putting people back in the canal and preparing to open it, that is a promising sign, an indication that the disengagement agreement is not simply a passing episode, but a possible step leading towards an unfreezing of the conflict.
During our stay with Sadat, he left the country only once to attend the Arab Summit meeting in Morocco. There, he was one of 20 Arab leaders, albeit a major one. He and King Faisal represent the Arab moderates. There were others there less accommodating. At his borrowed villa outside Rabat, he tackled immediately the summit's #1 issue. How should the battle between King Hussein of Jordan and the Palestinians be resolved? Hussein and the Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat came to pay court. Hussein wanted to speak for Palestinians inside Jordan. Arafat wanted to speak for Palestinians living everywhere.
You see, we are cooperating together. And as we have mentioned, there are 3 partners: Egyptians, Syrians, and the Palestinians.
The summit voted for Arafat, which was a defeat for Hussein and not the compromise Sadat would have preferred. Sadat did have the power to stop a Syrian move which would have aborted the American peace initiative in the Middle East. In a moment, we'll ask the president how the region has changed since the heads of state met.